sir, in the webinar, not to mention that the participants and the live audience have been enthusiastically waiting to listen to your address. Over to you, sir. So you have to unmute your mic, please. Thank you, sir.
Good. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Shalini Garg and all other members of the academia present at the University School of Management Studies at the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, participants of this seminar and people who have joined this book launch as well. Let me first of all thank the organizers for having me here. It's an honor, and I would definitely start with congratulating Professor Shalini Garg for the book, which I am virtually releasing today, which is HR Initiatives in Building and Inclusive Workplaces. Building and Inclusive Workplaces, which is the Emerald Publishing UK. Congratulations, ma'am, for this particular work of yours. Let me start with this because I think inclusiveness is a term which we have been using in discourses quite off and on. While etymologically speaking, there is nothing wrong about inclusiveness, but I would suggest that this should not make us unmindful of the fact that the emphasis is on participation. Because in inclusiveness, maybe at times one gets a feeling that somebody is including somebody. And therefore, it sounds a little more condescending kind of. But I'm sure the approach here is simply to ensure the participation of the deprived and disadvantaged. So in that sense, I welcome this particular academic work, and once again congratulate Professor Shalini Garg. Coming to the PWDs, whom we now call as Divyang, and their greater participation in society, and we are looking at this subject as it happens in the contemporary context, which is that of COVID-19. And in that particular aspect, I believe that we have to, first of all, review as to how COVID has impacted on our lives. If I look at it from the point of view of a student of social science, I believe that perhaps in this particular challenge that COVID-19 has compelled us to face, the destiny has its own way of making us learn a few lessons, I believe. And what are these lessons? I believe our public life, our family life, our personal life had all in the course of time become very, very extrovert. We were always insisting on appearing something than being something. The entire emphasis was on how do we appear, how people look at us, how are we seen by the society at large. And therefore, every small thing we tried to present as a very big thing. And many a times it kind of had its shadow over our objective assessment of any particular individual, any particular activity, any particular event as such. Because we go by optics as what they say. And optics had become so very important that somewhere perhaps the destiny realized that it is required to look within. And this corona crisis has compelled all of us not just to stay within, but also to look within. We are within the four walls of our houses largely. Some of us are attending offices these days, but still. And in a way, staying in our staying in the four walls of our houses has made us look within and look around in our family, in our house, essentially, because our social behavior is also in a way influenced by how do we look at our own family members. And in that sense, I believe COVID-19 has a very effective lesson for all of us to learn is about the importance of being than appearing. We appear good, we appear decent, we appear in every positive way, but whether we really are as what we appear is a question I believe the situation has compelled all of us to ask ourselves. Nobody is asking this question. But then this is like holding a mirror to yourself. And this, I believe, is a very, very important lesson. Another is the realization about our relationship with the society. How do we relate with the people? I mean, many a times, all kinds of symbolisms had become so very important that there are people who believe that they have to be on Twitter every hour for that matter, not just once in a day or once in a week, but every hour they are there on the social media, as if they are not there, the social media will fail to kind of communicate. And therefore, in a way, this also underscored our newfound attraction towards new avenues, new forums wherein we have to make our presence felt. And in doing so, we were kind of, at times, certainly, and in certain cases, definitely, doing some injustice to our relations. Because many times we find students, teenagers, and even individuals, adults, glued to their smartphones. So much so that the entire dunya for them was truly in their mutti, karlo dunya mutti mein kind of. And that gave a false sense of being controlling everything, while the facts were naturally different. So, in a way, an illusionary kind of atmosphere, uh, social media helped us in a way or prompted us to build around us. And in a situation like COVID, when we are within the four walls of our houses and interacting perhaps more and perhaps more intensely with our near ones and dear ones, I think we must have realized the strength and also the limitation of our social media presence. So, this is another important lesson I believe COVID has for all of us to give. We have, I believe, also while looking within, perhaps become more sensitive than what we were earlier because of the exposure through media to the hardships that most of our disadvantaged and deprived sections of the society, our own brethren, are facing thanks to this uh, lockdown period and the kind of hardships that they have to face. Perhaps we have realized as to how our urban life was, in a way, hopelessly dependent upon these very sections of our society. Lockdown will now be a thing of the past sooner than later. And then perhaps we would be able to realize as to how, starting from the domestic helps to the next door person who used to at least either help us as a gardener or as a washerman or maybe a shoe shine boy or anything, anybody of this kind, how their presence in fact had contributed to the comforts that we enjoyed in our personal lives. And therefore, in a way, I believe the society is perhaps more aware and alert to the uh, hardships that our disadvantaged and deprived sections of the society have been facing and how they were compelled. I look at this issue from another angle as well. I mean, many cities like Delhi or Mumbai or Kolkata for that matter, and the cities surrounding these main cities had become kind of dormitory cities. I mean, if people from, say, uh, any area in Purvanchal of Uttar Pradesh, whether Gazipur or Balia or Jaunpur, if they have decided to go back to their native places in a hour of crisis, it is because of the emotional kind of insecurity that they were perhaps facing in the urban areas in our metropolitan cities. And therefore, this underscores the fact that our metropolitan cities, they have huge skyscrapers, but perhaps still have failed in giving that sense of belonging, in generating that sense of belonging amongst those who migrated from their places and made these cities their home simply to earn some money. So, if cities have failed in giving that sense of belonging, it provides us another reason as to how do we take care of the entire society in a particular metropolitan area. Cities are not only for those who are staying in apartments, cities are also for those who are serving these people who are staying in apartments. And therefore, they are an inseparable part of the indivisible part of the society. But if the society fails in taking care of their emotional security, I believe there is much more that we need to do, need to think about. In this context, I believe our approach to the Divyang is also very, very important. In a way, coming to the subject of persons with disability, I would say that at least after this COVID 19, I would insist, I would emphasize, and I would expect that our school syllabi are restructured in such a way that there is some kind of a sensitivity training. After all, sensitivity had something to do with experience and exposure. And if our kids, at least when they're adolescent, in their adolescent age, if they are not exposed to the conditions of deprivation, then perhaps that sensitivity may not be kindled in their hearts. And therefore, it is required. I'm aware that there are certain schools here and abroad also who are kind of generating this uh, awareness about the disadvantaged, deprived, and especially disabled sections of the society through different ways. For example, there are schools who observe a white cane day, and every student is supposed to be blindfolded and then experiencing at least couple of hours as to how our people, our brothers who are not able to see must be experiencing and what kind of hardships they must be facing. So this, whether it is about the uh, blind people or those who are deaf and dumb, or in any way those who are not able bodied, it is for all those who are more fortunate than them to realize the agony and understand the aspirations of our disadvantaged brethren. And for that, I would suggest that at least after post-corona era, there are some changes introduced in our school syllabi so that the society, at least tomorrow, becomes perhaps more sensitive to the needs, to the agonies, to the aspirations of our disadvantaged and especially disabled people, which is I believe, very, very required. Lastly, I would only say that Shalini ji's book about workplaces, in a way, also makes us aware as to how we are dealing with our workplaces and public facilities as well. I have seen that simply because the relevant departments have failed in issuing proper instructions and guidelines, the ramps that many government buildings have created are in fact disabled unfriendly instead of being disabled friendly. Many people who are working in such offices told me that if we use this for these platforms and these ramps and other facilities, perhaps we may become disabled instead of disabled being facilitated to work in a normal manner. So I think there are a number of areas to be looked into when we talk about making our workplaces disabled friendly. In that sense, I believe it is also required, and I'm sure Shalini ji must have applied her mind to this also, that how do we make, and you cannot simply say workplace because every workplace has a different character. In the sense, a laboratory and a library are two distinct things. You may not require all those facilities for the disabled which you require in a library in a laboratory. So, whether it is a laboratory, whether it is a library, whether it is a school, whether it is a government office where people come off and on, whether it is a post office, whether it is a rationing office or a bus stand, every other public facility has a different character of its own and it requires a different set of guidelines to convert that workplace a more disabled friendly. In that regard, if something more is required to be done, I would appeal all those sections who are working for the uh, Divyang sections of our society also to apply their mind and come out with such guidelines which people like me, who are representatives of the people in the parliament, would emphasize and in a way pressurize the government and the decision makers to adopt those guidelines for different workplaces. Once again, I congratulate Professor Shalini for this book and conclude my speech. Thanking you all.